Where does your favorite NFL team's offensive line rank going into the 2020 NFL season? In this video, I rank every offensive line in the NFL heading into the 2020 NFL season. I break down the strengths, the weaknesses of every offensive line, the individual talents on each NFL team, and give you my list from worst to best on the offensive line in 2020. Before I give you number 32 all the way to number 1 on the offensive line in the NFL right now today, make sure that you do Gronk spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this, and comment below your opinion on where you believe your team's offensive line should rank from number 1 to number 32 right now going into 2020. The worst offensive line going into the 2020 NFL season, I'm sorry, but it has to be the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals, they're the worst because they're full of young, unproven players that do have some potential, don't get me wrong, but also players that are kind of journeymen. They're NFL backups, players that have never proven to be NFL quality starters. There is just question mark after question mark after question mark on this offensive line. They were dominated in both the pass and the running game last season. If it weren't for some magic from Joe Mixon last year, this line would have looked even worse. Thankfully, the Bengals just drafted at number 1 overall Joe Burrow, who I believe his best asset as a player is his pocket presence. At number 31, the second worst offensive line going into 2020 is the Miami Dolphins. Hey, Dolphins fans, at least you're not last, right? Because last season, you could argue that was one of the worst offensive lines of all time, the Miami Dolphins. What they put on the field in 2019, it was absolutely disgusting to watch. Whether it was pass protection or it was running the football, especially running the football. I don't think Miami could run the ball at all in any game last season. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, luckily this man is Ryan Fitzmagic, because if he wasn't, this team might have not won a game due to this offensive line. But this season, they've made a ton of upgrades. I do like the additions of Eric Flowers. I do like the addition of Ted Karras. And they drafted a couple of players that can help them out. Jackson is a little bit of a project at the tackle position. Possibly Hunt could start day 1. We'll have to see how the rookies factor into the starting lineup. Not exactly sure, but this line should be better and could potentially even be better than 31st in the league. The 30th best or the third worst offensive line in the NFL today is the Chicago Bears. And that may be a little shocking to some people because the Bears, the first thing we think of when it comes to the Bears on offense and their issues is not the offensive line. And I feel like this offensive line should take a little bit more heat than it has been given. Because, yes, was Trubisky the greatest quarterback in the world last year? No. But this offensive line was pretty bad. And I don't think it got much better. If not, it got worse. Of course, they had Kyle Long retire during the offseason. So that is a big blow to this team. Although he was getting up there in age, a little bit more injury prone, that was a stable player in the interior of your offensive line. And they do have a couple of good players. I like Daniels. I like Whitehair. That combo is nice. But the other 3 players on this line, it's journeymen, it's borderline backup players, and there's no real potential to speak of in those spots. The Bears are pretty much guaranteed to be one of the worst offensive lines in the league in 2020. At number 29 is the LA Rams. The Rams last season, if you just take a look at the statistics, you might be a little deceived by how the Rams offensive line performed because they actually ranked very well when it came to sack percentage and keeping their quarterback upright. If you're just looking at the sack numbers, you would think that the Rams offensive line was just as good as a unit in 2018, but that wasn't the case, especially in the running game. The running game took a huge blow last year, and that is the main focus of how Sean McVay really operates this offense. He needs that running game to work so that he can get the most out of his play action and his passing game. And to me, the offensive line for the Rams, whenever they actually get in the shotgun and want to throw the ball on 3rd and long or a big play, it's just constant duress for Jared Goff. Constant pressure. And Jared Goff is not a guy that's going to move around and buy some extra time for that offensive line. That's simply not his skill set. The Rams' offensive line really regressed due to the tackle position. Havenstein was much worse last year in 2019. Whitworth was not his normal self. And the interior, we saw even in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, that offensive line in the interior can really be taken advantage of by Bill Belichick and that Patriots D. The Rams, they're basically the same. They didn't really upgrade this unit. I'm a little afraid here, but luckily they do have Sean McVay and an awesome scheme that does allow them to get away with it at times. And if they can just get better tackle play, more normal tackle play for these two players at left and right tackle, then they should be better than last year. At number 28, the Jacksonville Jags. The Jags are another team that, despite their offensive line issues, they haven't really gone out and addressed it. And I believe that is because for the Jags, they have addressed their offensive line year after year after year in the draft, and they just really haven't hit with their selections. Whether it was Jawan Taylor, who ranked only 49th by PFF, or it was Cam Robinson, who has just continuously stunk year after year for them at left tackle. Their real only good players are Linder at center, who's very good, and Andrew Norwell, who is solid, but hasn't really been able to live up to that contract that they gave him from Carolina. So Jacksonville, they're okay at times. They can run the football when they want to, but when it comes to protecting Minshew and the quarterbacks, it has been pretty rough as of late. At number 27, the New York Jets. The Jets had arguably the second or third worst offensive line in 2020, but I do believe this offseason they've made some major strides, and I do appreciate that this team has actually gone out there and upgraded this line to help Sam Darnold, because for the Darnold supporters, they have said and they have preached that they need some protection for this guy. And Darnold, his biggest asset, just like Burrow, is his ability to move within the pocket and buy some extra time with that pocket presence. So it will help these younger players and these new additions mesh early on in the season. When you look at the Jets, they brought in a stud rookie tackle in Becton, who a lot of people really love, has a really high ceiling in terms of his athletic profile. They still have Winters at one of the guard spots. He's a solid player overall. McGovern at center, who is a nice addition from Denver, one of the top 10 centers, in my opinion, in the game. And then you look at Van Roten from Carolina, who is an underrated type of free agent signing that they were able to add to this line as well. Not breaking the bank, but a really nice move just to solidify the interior. And then at right tackle, I'm not a huge fan of this move, but at least they're going for something a bit different with Fant from Seattle. So we'll see if these moves actually do pay off, but I do believe that this team and this offensive line should be a little bit better, as they are a little bit more talented than the team last year. At number 26 is the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks offensive line, to be honest, it really doesn't have a big ceiling. And the reason being is, yes, the Seahawks did actually make some moves. They did more swapping and exchanging of players of the same caliber than they actually did upgrading, though, in my opinion. Seattle's offensive line, really since 2015, has been one of the bottom units in the league in terms of especially pass protection. Russell Wilson's usually scrambling around, running for his life, trying to make a play. Some of that is on Russell Wilson. Without Russell Wilson, this line is probably even worse and looked at much worse than it is. The reputation has probably been saved by Russell Wilson's magic. But when you look across the board, this line is made up of players that are rather past their prime or players that are just journeyman players and not a lot of potential. So to me, this is almost without a doubt a guaranteed bottom 10 offensive line in 2020. At number 25, the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta was really, really bad and kind of unexpectedly poor last season on the offensive line. And I think a big reason for that is rather the first round picks that they added and selected in the draft last year didn't pan out, or they got injured. You look at McGarry at right tackle, who flat out stunk, ranking 72nd at right tackle last year as a first-round pick. Lindstrom was injured early in the season, so he wasn't able to get in that starting lineup and help this team out. But this year, he'll be able to do that. So there is a bit of potential here still. Hopefully, McGarry can get better in his second season. Lindstrom hopefully can come in there and upgrade the guard spot. So I like that Atlanta has some potential, along with some solid guys, veterans like Alex Mack, and of course, Matthews at left tackle. Overall, though, Atlanta, they have a lot of question marks. Did not perform well last year. So we'll see how it goes. Right now, I have them at 25. At number 24, the Arizona Cardinals offensive line. I think for some people, you may rank them a little bit lower here, but I actually do like the potential that Arizona has on paper when it comes to their offensive line. Looking at the left tackle position, they re-signed DJ Humphries, who I don't love, but he is a solid starter at that spot, ranking 46th by PFF in 2019. At left guard, their best offensive lineman, Justin Pugh, who can play tackle or guard, a very good pass protector. At the opposite guard spot, Sweezy, who's just a veteran, solid NFL starting caliber lineman who's really good in the running game. And at right tackle, they'll have a competition. I'm not sure if the rookie Jones will get a look, but Marcus Gilbert was not able to play last year, and he is actually a pretty solid right tackle and a veteran in this league that has played a lot of starting snaps. So when you look across the board, it's not the sexiest offensive line with the biggest names, but a lot of just NFL talent. They could protect the passer decent enough this year. They should be better this season in that department. And then when it comes to running the football, this line was even really good last year, especially when Kenyon Drake entered the lineup. I would not sleep on the Cardinals in terms of a running offensive line, and that's why I ranked them a little bit higher. At number 23, a line that has kind of been made fun of by the NFL fandom community, and that is the Houston Texans. But the Texans offensive line has gotten much better, strides better over the last couple of seasons because they have actually gone out and added some talent. Of course, they made the big trade for Tunzel at left tackle, who was a huge upgrade at that spot. And instantly when he came into the room, this offensive line, huge upgrade. That left tackle is very important for this team because Deshaun Watson is a guy just like Russell Wilson in Seattle who can escape the pressure, can extend the play, and he wants to. That is his game. So sometimes the sacks are not on this offensive line. They are on Watson, but you need that left tackle because that's the blind side of Watson. Watson can see everything else. He can run away from everything else. That left tackle is very important. Across the rest of the line, I do like the potential that they have with Howard at right tackle. I think he made strides late last season. And then in the interior, it's not the greatest, but they are solid, and it's a very good run blocking line. I think very underrated in that department. There is a reason that Carlos Hyde was able to run for 1,000 yards, and that's I think because it's a deceptive run blocking offensive line at number 23. At number 22, the Minnesota Vikings offensive line. The Vikings offensive line, PFF, they're all over this line. I mean, it doesn't look great in terms of the PFF grades, but I do believe that this line does benefit a ton from the system that they have been running the last couple of seasons. I think especially last year, the zone scheme, a lot of play action, that does really help this offensive line, just like the Rams offensive line, especially the interior. But I think with the Vikings, they showed you last year that when they put their mind to it, they can really run the football, and that is thanks to the scheme, thanks to the backs, but I think the line has something to do with that. Bradbury is a young talent at center that I do like, and then at right tackle, O'Neal is another guy, a young talent at right tackle that I think has a bright future in this league. So they have two very young, up-and-coming studs on the offensive line. The rest of the line is kind of just veterans, NFL caliber starters, but nothing great. But it is a scheme, and players made up perfectly for this scheme, and that's why they're at number 22. At number 21, the Carolina Panthers offensive line. And this might be the shocker for how high they are on this list. Because the Panthers last year, their offensive line absolutely stunk it up. But the Panthers made some nice moves, I feel, to upgrade their offensive line. I actually think the Russell Okung trade was nice. I think that actually gives them two very capable tackles. Okung, the last time he played a full season, he ranked 13th, which was just a season ago for LA. So he's a top 15 tackle when he's on the field. And then when you look at Moton at right tackle, he was their best player for Carolina last year on this line, ranking 17th. So that's 2 top 20 tackles. That's a really good foundation for Teddy Bridgewater in front of him. And then Matt Paredes is a top 10, top 12 center in this league as well. Michael Schofield from Prison Break, man, at right guard, he is pretty good as well. I mean, he's kind of underrated. He ranked 36 last year by PFF. So they did make some moves. Okung, Schofield, that will add some playmakers to this offensive line. The left guard spot is a little bit more of a question mark, and they also still have Little, who was a rookie last season that I believe they drafted in the 2nd round. So they do have some depth. They do have some players that they can mix and match, and we'll see how it works out in their first season with the new coaching staff. At number 20, a team that went out and made some moves, as well as the Carolina Panthers, and made a trade with the Carolina Panthers. That is the LA Chargers. I do have the Chargers just slightly ahead of the Panthers, who did make that trade, Okung and Turner, and it really doesn't have to do with that trade so much, but actually the signing of Brian Bulaga. I think that was probably the best move that the Chargers have made in a couple of seasons in free agency. I think Brian Bulaga is a really good player. He does not give a lot of pressures. He's very good in the running game, and he's just a pro's pro. He will likely play right tackle, although I wouldn't be shocked if they moved him to left tackle, depending on the situation. Tevy has been there and a starter at right tackle, but he's expected to compete for the left tackle position if Bulaga does remain at right tackle. Then when you look at the interior, it's much better with the addition of Turner, who is a really good mover and run blocker for the Carolina Panthers, formerly in a multi-time Pro Bowler. And then at center, you have Pouncey, who's been a little banged up here and there and has been injured here and there, but hopefully he remains in the lineup this season. Across the board, it's a much better line. It's much better built across the board, and that's why I have the Chargers at number 20 instead of probably in the bottom 5 last year. At number 19, the New York G-Men. The Giants are another team that have slowly been building the offensive line that they really want to have. Starting at left tackle, Nate Solder, who, yes, they paid a lot of money to, and he hasn't necessarily been worth it, but Nate Solder is still a starting capable tackle and has had his moments for the Giants. He's not quite what he was, but he'll be better when the entire line is better. Then at left guard, you have Hernandez, who I like as a mauler and run blocker. Doesn't grade the best, but I do really think is a good run blocker for Saquon to lead the way. Pulley at center, who I'm not a huge fan of, but you could probably do worse. At right guard, Zeitler, who's one of the best pass protecting guards in football, ranking 7th last year. And at right tackle, their new 1st round pick, you have Thomas, who is the top tackle drafted in the 1st round in the draft in a tackle-loaded draft. So he right away is going to be an impact player. I think this Giants line is one, depending on their performance, their chemistry, could move up a ton based on this season. Just one spot ahead of the New York G-Men is the Washington Redskins. The Redskins, while they don't have the potential that the Giants have, they do have the reliability. The Redskins have had a very good offensive line for the past few seasons, and last year I feel it was one of the more underrated units in the league. When you look at the Skins, they can really still run the football regularly, and that is without a top-notch back or a dynamic running back. They've done it with mostly mediocre or below mediocre running backs for the past couple of years, and they've been able to really run the ball. So Washington, I think this offensive line, while they don't have the superstars anymore without Trent Williams, they'll have to overcome that loss. They've already dealt with it for a season. The only real add that they made was at left tackle with Lucas, who I think is a solid NFL tackle. We'll see if he can really snatch that opportunity and run with it. The rest of the line is the same starters that they had last year, including Scherf, who is the standout at right guard. I believe they did franchise him in the offseason. Moving forward, they look to make him one of their franchise guys and their standout, their stud on the offensive line. So Washington, not the sexiest line, but they get it done at number 18. At number 17, the Buffalo Bills offensive line. The Bills offensive line is one that I believe that every season under McDermott kind of just gets better. They get a little bit more chemistry. They get a little bit better in terms of running the football, a little bit better in terms of pass protection. And I do believe that their weakness does lie in pass protection. As you saw in a few games here and there, that Buffalo can be overwhelmed with blitz packages, and Josh Allen sometimes is running for his life. But Buffalo really ran the ball well last year when they wanted to. And I do believe across the board, they've made a lot of moves to secure some depth for this line, guys that don't even show up here on the graphic. I believe Buffalo across the board. Dawkins at left tackle is a standout to me. At center, Mitch Morse is probably their best player on this line. The real position that they need to be worried about and potentially replace is Ford at right tackle. Darrell Williams is a guy to look out for. He could potentially play guard or tackle and be a starter for this team come week 1. At number 16, the Denver Broncos. The Broncos kind of remind me of the New York Giants of the AFC when it comes to their offensive line building. They've spent a couple of seasons now really refining and adding some pieces to this offensive line to get it the way that John Elway really wants it to be. At left tackle, Bowles has been that top first-round pick that they've wanted him to be so far. He's had his rough spots, but I think last season was perhaps his best year, ranking 18th by PFF, so in the top 20. Reisner is another pick that they really liked, and he came in and ranked in the top 32 at guard. At center, another selection this season, and Cushenberry, we'll see how he works out, replacing McGovern, who was a really good player for them. At right guard, Glasgow from Detroit is a really great run blocker and mauler type, and he's going to just be physical and really set the tone for this line. I think it's going to go hand in hand with Melvin Gordon, that addition with Phillip Lindsay. And at right tackle, Jawan James has not been able to play for this team. That's going to be a huge addition in itself. So this line has a ton of potential because there's a lot of young talent that already has performed at a pretty high level. It's just a matter of putting it together, keeping the players on the field, and the coaching is really good. So we'll see if they can get this. I almost feel bad putting them at 16 because I feel like they're going to outperform this, but I'm being a little cautious here with the Broncos. At number 15 is the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs' offensive line, it's not the greatest, but it performs well enough considering the supporting cast around it when it comes to the receivers, the backs, the tight ends, and of course the quarterback. Mahomes can buy you time. He can make magic behind the line of scrimmage. You just need to hold up enough. And really, I believe where the Chiefs stand out is their tackle play. Fisher at left tackle, and specifically Mitchell Schwartz at right tackle, who you could argue is the best in the game at his position. But really, overall, it's all about Andy Reid. His coaching on the offensive line over the years has been phenomenal. He finds the right talent for his scheme year after year after year, and he always finds that reliable veteran to get the job done when he needs to. Andy Reid always has at least an average offensive line in the league. At number 14 is the Detroit Lions. The Lions' offensive line is probably one of the more underrated in the league. They made some additions this offseason. They moved around some players. They did let a couple of good players go, actually, but they replaced them, I believe, with players that I think fit the style of Matt Patricia's teams a little bit more. They also made some draft picks to add some depth to this line. So the Lions will have a lot of competition in camp and guys that can come in case of injury, which is great, especially for the offensive line. They don't really have anybody outside of Ragnow that sticks out. Ragnow is a really great player. Decker is pretty good as well at left tackle. But they just have overall a good offensive line. And Patricia has confidence in these players. And of course, he has been a coach for offensive linemen in the past in New England. So he does have experience here. The big addition that they did make was Big V from Philadelphia. He did rank 11th from PFF last season, and of course started in a Super Bowl, the one that they won in Philadelphia. I believe he's going to be a better addition than a lot of people are giving him credit for, and I think he really is going to be able to set the tone as a run blocker for Matt Patricia's offense in Detroit. I think this is one that a lot of people are sleeping on. They're not the most talented individually, but they're a good all-around unit. At number 13, the NFC North rival of the Lions, the Green Bay Packers. The Packers actually do fall in the rankings because they did lose Brian Bulaga. Brian Bulaga is just a really good player, and it's hard to replace a really good tackle in the NFL today, and that is going to hurt Aaron Rodgers. That's going to speed up his clock in the back of his mind, at least initially, until Wagner or whoever it is can really show him that he can block on that side. But the rest of the line, if Wagner is not quite what he used to be, because he was a good player at one time, he just wasn't great last year for Detroit. But the rest of the line, Bakhtiari is a stud. Of course, we know this, one of the best pass protectors in the league. Jenkins is super underrated. Lindsley's one of the better centers in the league, and Turner is a solid guard as well. This team also has some depth in the interior that I do like. Green Bay is a really good zone blocking running game, and they are overall pretty good as well in pass protection. I do think that they did get exposed in some games, specifically versus San Francisco, so they can and are capable of having some down games. But more often than not, they do keep Aaron Rodgers upright. At number 12, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line. The Buccaneers offensive line, the first thing that people kept saying about Tom Brady signing in Tampa is, can he stay upright? Can they protect him? Blah, 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 blah. Well, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line is actually individually very talented. They have a very underrated cast on this offensive line. And I do believe the numbers that you see last season are due to a lot of passing attempts from Jameis Winston, Bruce Arians' downfield passing attack that inherently is you're going to have to block longer up front to make these plays happen. And look, they've been in the top 3 in passing the last couple of years. But the Bucs offensive line, I think, is super underrated when it comes to the run blocking. Just because they haven't been able to run the football enough due to the fact that Jameis Winston threw 30 interceptions and they were behind a lot in these games. But the Bucs have a lot of good players. Again, Smith at left tackle is a solid left tackle. Nothing special, but solid. Good enough for Tom Brady. They just drafted a first rounder in Tristan Wirfs, who's super athletic, has a huge ceiling. I believe Jensen and Marpet's one of the best duos in the interior of any offensive line at left guard and center, and Kappa's only getting better with each season. So this line, especially the interior, is being slept on. I think the Bucs are going to be able to keep Tom Brady upright, and especially because of this interior, that is where the pressure really affects Brady. Brady can deal with lackluster tackles. It's the interior that's very important for him. At number 11, the powerful run-blocking line of the Tennessee Titans. Now, of course, they did lose Jack Conklin, so that is going to take a little bit of a toll on this line. But replacing him with Kelly is not a bad way to start in getting this line back to form. He's a good player. Davis is the weakness at right guard, but the rest of the line is awesome, whether that's Jones at center, Saffold at left guard, who's very versatile, well-rounded, and at left tackle, Taylor Lewan. We saw them dominate all January, all December, and that's what they're capable of because they're tough, they're big, they're athletic, and they absolutely are physical. At number 10, even despite the loss of Brandon Brooks, the Eagles' offensive line should still be pretty good. It should still at least be top 12 in this league next year. I am a little concerned about who replaces Brooks, whether that is Driscoll, the rookie, or Pryor, who is a tackle. If they move him inside, maybe they sign somebody like Warford, who's still a free agent, or they bring back Peters and move somebody else inside. They also have multiple questions. It's not just that question. If this was a regular year for the Eagles where they can rely on Peters and Lane Johnson to get it done, they can't because Andre Dillard is basically, this is his first year. This is rookie season as far as I'm concerned. Now, Kelsey is amazing. Lane Johnson is awesome. But can this line deal with 2 different starters? And dealing with that chemistry is going to be interesting. I'm very intrigued to see the Eagles' offensive line because that has been the strength of their team when they have been winning. At number 9, the Pittsburgh Steelers, staying in the state of Pennsylvania. The Steelers' offensive line for years has been one of the best in football. The one thing I will say about the Steelers' offensive line, the reason why they're a little bit lower this year than past years heading into 2020 is because they're a very old unit. Villanueva is getting up there. Wisniewski is getting up there. Pouncey is even getting up there, and DeCastro. So this line is like 30 plus at basically every position, and that is more likely prone to injury and just overall fatigue as the year wears on. They're not quite in the prime of their careers like they were a couple of years ago when this team was just mauling people. But overall, across the board, they don't have anybody ranked worse than 33rd who is Pouncey at center. Their tackles are very good. Their guards are possibly even better. I think the Steelers, they really don't have a flaw. It's just the age that I think holds them back from being an elite unit this year. At number 8, the Baltimore Ravens, the rival in the AFC North for the Steelers. The Ravens were arguably the best offensive line last year when it especially came to run blocking and Lamar Jackson. But I do believe that the line does benefit a ton from the most elusive player in football in Lamar Jackson, whether that's pass protecting or run blocking. I mean, Lamar Jackson, the threat of him running in the run game is really going to help any offensive line. And then when it comes to the passing game, it's so hard to tackle him behind the line of scrimmage. So their sack numbers aren't quite as high as they probably should be. The Ravens are losing Marshall Yanda, and that is a big concern because he is a Hall of Fame guard. But when you look at their strength, it really is the tackle position. I think the two young guys that they have in Stanley, who's a top 3 left tackle, and then at right tackle, they have Brown, who's a powerful monster at right tackle. I am a tad concerned about if they can still run the ball as well as they did without Yanda because he is just amazing in that department. But with Lamar Jackson and these running backs and this running scheme, they should remain, at least statistically, one of the better lines in the league. At number 7 is the New England Patriots offensive line. And some people last year, if you watch them, they were very inconsistent. So it really was dependent on what game you watched them in. And yes, Tom Brady did struggle. He was under pressure. And a lot of people are going to say that's because of the offensive line. Well, for me, I don't think it was because of the offensive line. I do believe that it was mostly due to the receivers' lack of separation and getting open. It wasn't really due to the offensive line. Once teams figured out that they could blitz and overload this talented offensive line, it really is useless to have all these great players up front if your receivers can't separate from man coverage. This year, though, the Patriots get even better up front. And going into last year, I think they were a top 5 line. They have regressed a little bit in my rankings because of their performance last year, but they get David Andrews back, who in my opinion is a top 5 center in the game. They now have a full season with Isaiah Wynn, who when he started was very good. And hopefully, if you're a Patriots fan, Marcus Cannon can have a bit of a bounce back. Wasn't awful last year, but he can be better. And of course, Joe Thuney, Shaq Mason, hopefully they don't trade Thuney sometime before the season because he's very important. When you're talking about interior lines, it doesn't get any better than the Patriots. They should have a better rushing attack due to Andrews back and a better pass protecting unit due to Wynn being there at left tackle, hopefully for the whole year. At number 6, I know this is kind of a shocker and maybe I'm a little high on them, but I have big expectations for the Cleveland Browns offensive line because last year, for some reason, there's this thing going around that people think that the Browns offensive line could not run block last year. Like, did you watch the games? Seriously? They were unreal at run blocking last year for Nick Chubb and for Kareem Hunt. There's a reason that Chubb was so great last year. Outside of just his talent alone, the Browns could really maul people. They're physical, they're big up front, they're fast, they're athletic. So this line from a run blocking perspective was already phenomenal in top 3 to top 5 in the league. But now you add Conklin at tackle, who is actually known for his run blocking and is one of the top 3 tackles in the league at run blocking, but is also going to give you that added bonus as a pass protector for Baker Mayfield and protect him. And then at the other tackle position, you added a first-round pick who, in my opinion, was the best tackle in the draft. So the Browns hugely upgrade at the tackle position. And when you look across the board from a ranking perspective, they have 3 players in the top 12 of their position, a top-notch rookie, and a player that's just a solid NFL pro at right guard. So to me, the Browns, if that right guard position can up their game, then this is a line that's going to be nearly unstoppable. At number 5, the Dallas Cowboys offensive line. The Cowboys, this is probably one of their weaker units heading into a season over the past decade. This offensive line has been phenomenal, like Hall of Fame worthy over the past 8 to 6 years. It's been phenomenal to me, especially at left tackle with Tyron Smith, who's been one of the best in the game since he's entered the league, basically. At right tackle, La'el Collins performed arguably even better than Smith last year, and he's one of the better right tackles in the league. And then you move inside with Zach Martin, who is toe-to-toe with Quentin Nelson for the best guard in the league. But the problem remains, Travis Frederick has retired, so you no longer have a top 2 center in the league. You have to, is it Looney? Is it the rookie that you're going with? And then at left guard, Connor Williams has struggled. Like, is he really the answer at left guard? So now you have 2 question marks. You have 3 amazing players, top-notch guys, but you do have 2 question marks, and that's 2 more question marks than the Cowboys have had in the past. At number 4, the Las Vegas Raiders offensive line. The Raiders offensive line, while they may not grade as well as some of these other offensive lines below them, to me, when I watch the tape and watch the film, this offensive line is phenomenal, and a big reason the Raiders could continuously run the football and really move the ball last year. They protected Carwell. They ran the ball extremely well with Josh Jacobs, the rookie, and that was without a lot of weapons. As I just stated with New England, they didn't have weapons, but the Raiders were able to still protect their QB, and that speaks to the talent up front, and that's probably why the grades are a little lower than they probably should be. Incognito is a tough dude at guard who's an excellent run blocker. Jackson is probably the weakness at right guard, and he's considered a very good player. Rodney Hudson's awesome, probably a top 10 center. Colton Miller is only getting better with experience. And at right tackle, I love Trent Brown's skill set. He is one of the most dynamic tackles in the league. So the Raiders have everything you want. They're going to maul people. They can pass protect. And I believe that they are going to dominate this year in 2020. At number 3, the San Francisco 49ers offensive line. Last year, I don't think I had this line as high. I actually think the Niners offensive line, get this, they've gotten better. I know that's kind of scary. Maybe the Niners defensive line's gotten a little bit worse because they lost to Forrest Buckner. But the Niners offensive line, they may be even better running the ball. That's a scary thought because they ran over a lot of teams last year. But Trent Williams, I mean, when he plays, he is, for my money, a top 5 tackle in the league. And he is just a wall when it comes to pass protection. Tomlinson's super underrated as a guard in the game today. Richburg is underrated as a center in the game today with his ability to move in the screen and running game. Right tackle Mike McGlinchey, another year of experience, is going to be huge. And then at right guard, they have a competition between 3 different players to see who replaces Person, who they cut in free agency. So they believe they're getting better at that spot. Plus, they have a lot of depth, as we saw last year. They replaced their tackles who both got injured last year, Staley included, and they were able to replace them and keep the engine moving. Kyle Shanahan's scheme allows this line to really get the most out of their talent, and I think the Niners are absolutely going to steamroll teams week after week after week. At number 2, the New Orleans Saints offensive line. You could argue that the Saints offensive line is better than the Colts offensive line, but the Saints offensive line, I think, just has younger players, less experience, more question marks. So that's why I have them at number 2. But in terms of pass protection, I don't know if it gets much better. I mean, there was numerous games where the Saints, Drew Brees didn't get touched or even like remotely close to touched. Like, their tackle position is absurd. Armstead and Ramczyk, you could argue both of these guys are the best at their position, and that is very rare. And then you move inside, McCoy is a top 5 center according to PFF. They have a rookie who's the best interior lineman in the draft in Ruiz. And yes, Pete does get some heat from Saints fans. That's just because the rest of the line is so amazing. Pete is incredible as a run blocker, doesn't get the credit that he really does deserve because they run the ball behind him a lot. So the Saints offensive line, it doesn't get much better than that. And at number 1, you guessed it, the Indianapolis Colts offensive line, to me, is the best and most complete in the league with the least amount of question marks and the most chemistry heading into 2020. There is a reason that Phillip Rivers signed with the Colts, and I do believe that reason number 1 is because he wanted to be protected, and there's not a better line that you could have chosen than the Indianapolis Colts. But when it comes to not just pass protection, I think they're even better as a run blocking line. I think they can function with less than capable running backs and still put up 1,000 yards with that running back if they choose to. We saw this numerous times last year. No matter the starting running back, they were able to run the ball. And Frank Reich, that really opens up the entire playbook, that whatever play action, running the ball, screen game, passing game, drop back, doesn't matter. It is the Colts offensive line. Quentin Nelson, to me, is the best offensive lineman in the league. Costanzo is a top 10 tackle in terms of pass protection. Braden Smith is also slept on. Their weakness is Glowinski, and he is a top 50 player at his position, which, if you do the math, that's still a number 2 guard in this league. And Kelly ranked 8th at center. So they have numerous top 10 players, top 12 players. They have 4 top 12 players at their position. That's incredible. That is Cowboys-esque of the last few seasons. The Colts will dominate this year up front. I think will be even better because Rivers will get rid of the ball quicker, and that will allow them to perform at a higher rate and help their stamina throughout the game and help their fatigue. So to me, the Colts are the best line in the league across the board, and those are my rankings for every offensive line in football today. If you enjoyed, spike the like button and subscribe for more NFL videos just like this. It's Mitch. Peace.